they're coming? Okay. I'm watching for them.
It's 10 o'clock. We have a quorum. I will call the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of September the 4th, 2024 to order. First item of business. The chair will acknowledge that we're located on the traditional territory of the Last Attached people, and now the adoption of the public agenda.
Move adoption.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Anything additional here? Seeing nothing. Call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. No petitions or delegations. Adoption of the previous meeting minutes. Robin?
Chair, I had a comment on the minutes for the item, the Fire Safety Act legislative requirements item. I made a motion and not the entire motion is reflected in the minutes.
Okay, just before we get there, can we move adoption and then we can deal with that?
Don't we have to adopt them as amended?
Yes, but we need to have a motion on the floor before we speak to it.
Oh, okay. Move adoption.
Move adoption.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Director Maloney.
Okay, thank you. So the motion that I made was that the committee recommend a further report be prepared to examine options for meeting the requirements of the Fire Safety Act in consultation with the fire chiefs serving the electoral areas. And that last phrase was left off the minutes.
Can we add that, staff?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. Was that a written motion? Did you have, or was it read out at the time?
I read it out
Okay.
at the time.
All right. We did a motion to adopt the agenda as revised, I
I'll
guess.
move to adopt the minutes as amended.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none. No public consideration, notice of motion, no chair's report. Down to staff reports, item K, number 1, Electoral Area D Stormwater Feasibility Study for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Sheena will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, through the chair. So stormwater in Area D has been something that's been explored for some time with a recent motion to investigate the potential of establishing a stormwater management service for Electoral Area D. We approached McElhaney Engineering, who developed the 2015 Stormwater Management Plan, to provide us with a proposal to do a sort of high-level first blush study to see, so we could sort of further evaluate what the complexity and costs of a full-blown report would be. So they provided us a proposal that equates to just under $15,000, which can be covered under the Area D feasibility study budget, that will identify catchments in higher density areas and identify cost D-class estimates for what a stormwater system conveying those flows back into the water courses in the area might be. So once they've done that, we'll have an idea of what those flows might be and some high-level costs, and we can decide what the best next steps are. So our recommendation is that we award the contract to McElhaney for this round of the study, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that there might be.
Thank you. Anything from directors? Seeing none on receipt. Oh, Director Mooney.
I just have a question about the definition of stormwater, because it seems like it's rainwater, but is it rainwater that's landing on non-porous surfaces like roofs or asphalt driveways? It wasn't really clear on what that meant.
So stormwater is rainwater wherever it falls. So this would be looking at both the flows, the sheet flows that go overland, and what is captured through the roof leaders. So that 2015 report that is appended to this staff report does identify areas where there are better permeability and less permeability within the catchment area. So it all depends on how that water is able to infiltrate into the ground. So it is whatever might go into sort of your typical, what you might see your curb and gutter storm system. So it's any water that can run into an area that can be captured and taken away. So there are other options for on-site management, but this is essentially to carry water off of the site, but putting it back into the water courses as maintaining their flows is required.
Okay, thank you.
Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? And that is carried. And do you have a motion, Director Rice?
I would move the recommendation. I just got to go back to it. Sorry.
Just read it out, please.
Yep. I would move I would move the recommendation that the committee recommend that the feasibility study to investigate the potential of establishing a stormwater management service for Electoral Area D be awarded to McElhaney Engineering and that it be funded through the Electoral Area D feasibility study budget.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Item 2, Quathiasi Cove Water Service Feasibility Study Cost Update for receipt.
Move receipt.
Need a seconder?
Second.
Second.
And Sheena will speak to this, I think.
Thank you. Through the committee to the chair. So a water system in Quathiasi Cove has also been discussed for quite a while. And if you recall, earlier this year, starting late 2023 and provided to the committee in early 2024, we updated the groundwater study through Western Water and Associates, and they increased the number of wells that they estimated a water service would require. So the direction at that time was to go back to Coors and Associates, who did the overall feasibility study and design of the water system, to get an updated cost estimate to incorporate the cost of those additional wells. That exercise was not as straightforward and linear as we expected. Until we have done testing, we're not entirely sure how many wells will be needed to serve each of the sort of different phased areas in the report. So what we settled on was Coors updated their 2021 cost estimate like for like, which included 3 wells within the catchment area, and then provided essentially a unit cost for additional wells that would be tacked on should the groundwater investigation actually determine that we need more than 3 wells to support phase 1. Phase 1 pretty much mirrors the Quathiasi Cove sewer service area, and so we did some very preliminary, very high-level cost estimates of what it would be in the absence of any grants if we needed to fund the estimated $12.9 million to build that phase 1 catchment area. So that is included in the financial analysis, but I do really want to underscore that that is very, very preliminary and high level. We just wanted to provide a little bit of more information to assist the directors in making their decisions. So as I just mentioned, the phase 1 area went from 10 million to just under 13. So that's, not a exciting cost estimate, but it's not a number that was particularly shocking to us, as we've seen with the other escalating costs for construction. To build the entire catchment area as it was envisioned in the 2021, that is over a $20 million project if we wanted to build out, but it is worth noting that the areas outside of that Quathiasi Cove sewer are fairly low density. They will be able to densify if this system was in place, but currently there isn't a lot of population to fund that additional $7 million to build out that entire system. So what we are recommending right now is that we proceed with well testing, and that will help us inform how many wells are needed in each of the relative service, phase areas, I suppose, and that will help us inform if we want to take next steps into construction and how large of a system we might want to undertake at that time. Happy to answer any other questions that there might be.
Director Winnie?
Just a bit of a clarification. We're not recommending anything. We've put some alternatives for the directors, but we don't have a recommendation.
Thank you. Director Winnie?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Sheena Fisher and the engineering staff for this report. I have a couple of questions. So on page 3 of the report, it states, as per the Water Sustainability Act and the Drinking Water Protection Act, proposals for further densification in the Quathiasi Cove area are contingent upon the provision of a community water system to ensure the supply of safe potable water. So what I'm curious about from that statement is a little bit more information on those 2 acts, and if there have been previous reports which reference those acts and their relationship to the need for a water system in the cove. I personally would love to read that information, and I'm wondering if that has been done or what. Yeah.
To my knowledge, there aren't papers on that. The Water Sustainability Act is the act that governs groundwater licensing. And so my understanding, and planning can jump in if I misspeak here, is that certain lot sizes are required for there to be a well system. And so that it's really about that lot size for individual residential wells versus a community water system that is impacting the ability to further densify.
If I can add to, I don't think there's any specific reports we have that, but we'll speak to it a number of times. And Sheena's exactly right. You're talking about lot size densities. So if you got lots that are too small, let's say for a well and a septic system, the only other alternative is community water system. And so I think when we're referring to that, we're understanding the need or the requirement based on lot sizes of having, and that's the challenges we faced in the Q Cove to densify that with the kind of buildings or structures that we're talking about. Let's say a seniors care facility or something. You need a community water system in order to make because a well and septic won't suit that, and anything serving more than 2 properties is defined as a community water system. So that the Water Sustainability, Water Protection Act, those are, I think, referencing more of that look, if you want some kind of multi-use complex for whatever, it's going to be required a community water system, because otherwise there's no other solution, right? Because there's not the size to it. And delivering water to another multi-units is a community water system.
Okay, well, I thank you for that explanation, because there is Quadra Seniors Housing, and they do have, I suppose, some sort of water system, because you referenced septic, but in Q Cove, there is a sewer system, so I think that may slightly change the regulations. I do understand that there are limitations without a water system for sure. Frequently, we do hear about the need for a water system in the Cove in order to support growth in the Cove. And I'm curious from staff if there are instances where the calls for a water system are coming from Q Cove landowners. And I'm curious how often or how many residents of the Cove staff could maybe indicate that are really looking for a water system in the Cove. And I think it's really important to dig into this as we talk about investigating water system, because those are some hefty price tags. And if that's not something that's really being indicated as being desired strongly by the community, then I am not sure that imposing another expensive system with potentially escalating annual costs would be welcomed by the community. So is there somebody that can speak to that, if there is that need, or?
Thank you, through the chair to the director. Certainly from the planning department's perspective, we get a number of inquiries each year from residents within the Cove, which are on the sewer system, looking to further develop their properties. And once they reach out to Island Health or have applied for subdivision through the Ministry of Transportation, have been advised that they cannot further densify because there's a lack of water there. The wells are too close to one another. A community water system is required. There's a couple of larger property owners within the Cove that are looking to develop, to do some sort of mixed-use, multifamily type developments as per the Q Cove Village Plan. However, again, without a more fulsome community water system, they are unable to explore those types of developments. My suggestion would be if there's a curiosity of the director as to the interest of those that are looking for a community water system, perhaps there could be some sort of a consultation or community survey, something to that effect, which would provide more formal information to the director. But certainly I can speak on behalf of myself and the rest of my staff that there are a number of owners within the Cove and potential property development groups that are looking for this and have been advised that they can't proceed without a community water system.
Thank you. May I ask another question, Chair?
You may, just let me ask, is everybody in Q Cove on sewer?
Yes.
Okay.
If they're not, they should be.
Well, so there is a Quathiasi Cove sewer service area, but not all homes within that area actually have infrastructure fronting them. So the majority of the homes are serviced through sewer within the
Some are
Quathiasi
still on
Cove sewer
septic.
area. Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Would those be in the outlying areas of the area of this service area?
Predominantly, they are to the north. I would encourage you to take a look at the plans within the financial report, or I can also send them separately, so to sort of detail where the infrastructure is versus where the boundaries of this current service area are.
I do have one more question,
ahead.
if I may, Chair. Thank you. We're talking about really expensive price tags and the need for this, potential need for this system. And I do sometimes wonder if there might be opportunities for collaboration and working together with the Weewakai Nation on sewer infrastructure to serve nearby Cape Mudge Village and the Cove. And stretching my mind further, I wonder if there may be even a glimmer of feasibility or appetite from the Weewakai Nation leadership to consider sharing a connection with Cape Mudge water infrastructure with the Cove. It seems funny to me to consider building another multi-million-dollar system just down the road from where one was recently constructed. And maybe this is the way things have to be, but working together and collaborating, I do feel often yields better results. And if we can share systems and work together, then we may support benefits to all. So I do have a motion, Chair, following receipt that kind of speaks to that, which isn't either of the options on the report.
Anything further? Seeing none on receipt, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Director Vinesh disappeared. All right, number 3, Outer Discovery Island solid
I
waste.
had a subsequent
Sorry, I
motion.
think
Oh, you
there's-
have a motion,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Director
you not hear
Bonish,
me?
no, we can. He just said visually, we just put a motion. Can you see the motion?
Okay.
Yeah, we just can't see you, which is, that's,
Yeah, I got the motion, thank you.
So I would like to move that a thoughtful inquiry be submitted to Weewakai Nation Chief and Council regarding potential opportunities for collaboration on sewer and/or water infrastructure between Cape Mudge Village and Q Cove, and which outlines related report findings to date.
I'll second that.
Thank
Any
you.
discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? You in favor, Director Vinesh?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's carried. Now we're down to number 3. Outer Discovery Island solid waste, Hoskin Landing dumpster for receipt.
Move receipt?
Move receipt. Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Anything
thank you,
from staff?
I think Sheena will speak to this as well, Mr. Chair. Just give us a sec to pull it up. Sheena?
Yeah, sorry, apologies through the chair, didn't know what we were waiting for. And I do want to apologize for my misspeaking in the last one. The CAO was certainly right. They were options, not a staff recommendation. So moving forward to the Outer Discovery Island solid waste, Hoskin Landing dumpster. So the request was made that we explore placing a dumpster at Hoskin Landing for use by Outer Discovery Islanders. Once we contacted haulers, it became quite apparent that there was a huge reluctance on their part to even engage in this discussion due to the risk of contamination and an inability to monitor who is using that dumpster. Because of that, none of the haulers were willing to provide costs. They essentially weren't willing to provide service as it was described, which is essentially just a dumpster somewhere around Hoskin Landing. They did say that they would be happy to provide a dumpster if it was staffed or in a secure locked compound. But in the absence of having any areas suitable for that in Hoskin Channel Landing, those discussions pretty much stopped at that stage. Some of the reasons were, again, inability to monitor who's using that, which is a challenge that we would need to overcome if we were to establish this service, is who can use it, how is that enforced and monitored. And then the risk of contamination. And this is because the vehicles that would collect this dumpster would need to be collect waste from the rest of the island and other parts of their service area. And one dumpster full of contaminated waste can contaminate their entire truckload, which greatly increases their tipping fees, and they would not necessarily know whose waste contaminated the load. So for them, it was not wanting to pay those increased costs. And the increased cost of the risk associated with an unmanned dumpster. So doing a little bit more digging, I did contact one of the local service providers who does a per bag collection. And they were very willing to coordinate directly with residents to do sort of a large pickup at either Hoskin Landing or Harriet Bay. They were also cited concerns for cost at Hoskin Channel Landing, since it is quite a drive to get there and quite a ways from where they would need to take the waste in Campbell River, and did suggest Harriet Bay would be a far more economical solution for them to meet a resident of the Outer Islands to sort of transfer waste from that community onto their sort of pickup truck. So they did say that they would be very happy to engage directly with Outer Discovery Island residents on that, and then would be able to provide sort of their fee structure based on the amount of waste that might be collected and the frequency there. So the options that we have presented are that we could continue looking, evaluating the costs and operational issues associated with a solid waste dumpster at Hoskin Channel Landing or Harriet Bay, if that was a location that we were directed to explore, or that perhaps we've exhausted some of our options at this point and perhaps we should hold on the solid waste. I will mention that we are still sending the resolution to the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board about the request for the extended producer responsibility events, which was one of the recommendations out of one of the report that led to this, as well as further advocating for the waste transfer station on Quadra Island. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you.
Discussion? Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report. It really clearly outlines that there are significant impediments to accessing the solid waste disposal options for Outer Discovery Islands residents. And, you know, the request for that came directly from residents, so now I can share the problems or the concerns, and they will have a more clear understanding of what we're up against. But I do, I thank you, because when it's all written out so clearly, it really helps. And I have a subsequent motion, Chair, following receipt. Thank you.
Anything else? On receipt, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that's carried. And then Director Bouidi.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that the Outer Discovery Islands Solid Waste Hoskin Landing Dumpster Report of August 30th, 2024 be considered by the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Advisory Committee to further illustrate the need for a secure solid waste disposal option on Quadra Island for the benefit of Outer Discovery Islands residents and Quadra Island residents.
Second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? You in favor, Director Vinesh?
I am.
That's unanimous. That's carried. Moving down to bylaws. Number one, bylaw number 157, liquid waste management service receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Mr. Chair, I think Edith can answer any questions that the directors have, but this was, again, the efforts we discussed at the board meeting to split the liquid waste management service from B and D into two. And instead of eliminating the current bylaw and then trying to go out and establish two new services, the discussion was to try and take them and split them in amendments. So what you have before you is the process that we're recommending to follow to do that.
Right. Anything further? On receipt? All those in favor? Oh,
I have a
Director Vinesh?
Thank you, and thank you, staff, for this report. Just for those listening online and sort of trying to figure out what this is, and correct me if I make any mistakes here, staff or Director Rice. But basically, the bigger picture is that Director Rice is looking at doing some reports and potential projects in his electoral area that are not necessarily connected to Cortez. And by separating this bylaw, it allows him to do the necessary tax requisition and move forward with those projects in a way that doesn't have Cortez paying for it, and vice versa. And just if you can confirm that, staff, thank you.
The vice versa at the end was critical, yes. So Director Rice, you're looking or potentially looking to do the same thing as him. So splitting them two in half, and there's an available requisition there. Whether it's collected or not, that's up to you at budgeting time, but it gives you the ability to individually requisition for things that you have on your agenda.
On receipt then?
Thanks very much.
Director Rice?
Just further comment to that, so just to provide a little bit more clarity, this would allow Area D now to pick up a discussion on potential sewer systems. So I think it is quite important that we do divide this out. This allows me now the opportunity to commit money for further studies, because basically we do have to start from square zero again and find out what are we going to do to bring sewers to the community.
Okay. On receipt, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that's carried. And then item B, Director Rice?
Move recommendation that the committee recommend that the third reading of bylaw number 157 be rescinded.
Second that.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that's carried. Number C, Director Rice?
Move recommendation that the committee recommend that the sixth clause of the preamble of bylaw number 157 be amended to read, and whereas approval of the electorals have been obtained pursuant to section 349 of the Local Government Act.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. And third reading, Director Rice?
Move recommendation D, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 157 be given third reading as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous again. And finally, Director Rice?
Move recommendation E, that the committee recommend that the regional board district seek approval of the electors for bylaw number 157 using an alternative approval process, and that the approval be sought throughout the entire service area rather than separately in each electoral area.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's unanimous again and carried. Number 2, Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw Short-Term Rental Amendments for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second.
Staff?
Meredith can speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you through the chair. So as we had done in areas B, C, and D, this is the amendments to the rural land use bylaw and for Desolation Sound to permit short-term rentals. And a survey went out to the community and was direct mailed to the community to ensure that we captured a large representation of those islands. And from that, we received 47 responses, 46 of which were from Reed Island specifically. And of that, 76% responded with a yes when wanting to permit short-term rentals, indicating both commercial and rural land use designations for where that use should be permitted. So what is proposed in this bylaw here would be changes to permit short-term rentals as an accessory to residential use in all land use designations. Thank you.
Directors, anything? Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff for this report. I do have a question, if I may. And I just want to start with saying that I'm really grateful that you did the survey. And did you say that you mailed out something? I thought it was an online survey. Oh,
It was both.
wow. Okay, that's amazing. That's beyond my expectations. That's great. So, and it really does speak to the Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw, which says in its introduction that it was prepared in response to local concerns and that the interests of residents were a major factor in completing the bylaw. And the goals and objectives are derived locally. So I really appreciate that the survey was done and that the amendment to the bylaw that's being recommended is incorporating the majority viewpoint. I have a question around the altering the definition of resort. The draft bylaw 577 proposes to replace the definition of resort with a definition of tourist accommodation. And the proposed replacement definition of resort, which is tourist accommodation, does not include private yachts clubs or private clubs, which I'm not sure if those have been, there may have been zoning or land designations which have occurred since 1993 based on the current definition of resort. But those are currently in the definition of resort. So if you're replacing the definition of resort with the definition of tourist accommodation and it doesn't cover those two items, I do have a little bit of concern with that. I don't know, maybe somebody on staff knows if there are private clubs or private yacht clubs which have been designated since 1993 with those. I guess my concern is that there could be unintended ripples in the future if we remove those. Does staff have a thought on that or any further information on that?
They're listed separately in the bylaws. They're specific.
Thank you, through the chair. So the definition that's provided here is consistent in all the bylaws that address tourist accommodation. That is consistent for our application and interpretation of tourist accommodation across zoning bylaws in our region. In this case, I'm not aware of a circumstance where that omission would create an unintended consequence.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I am planning on, at the end of this discussion, making a motion to amend the interpretation of resort to ensure that it retains those pieces as well. I have another question, and that is the proposal to permit short-term rentals in all designations. There are 3 upland area designations, land area designations, and 8 foreshore area land use designations. And I'm curious if permitting short-term rental use in all designations could create a jeopardy for the Strathcona Regional District in the future. Considering the staff report that we have here today indicates a desire of the community to permit short-term rentals in residential and commercial zones, I'm wondering what the rationale is for indicating permitted in all designations.
Thank you, through the chair. They're being promoted or proposed for all upland zones, which would be what the survey indicated that the community was hoping for. So that's why it was drafted that way.
Thank you, through the chair. And accessory to residential use, because that's what was shared through the community, is that there was a desire that there was a resident caretaker on site, and that it was, to assist those more full-time residents in economics.
I appreciate that. One of the upland use is forestry 1 of the 3. So are there areas that are being used as residential, which are zoned or designated as forestry 1? Is that something that's happening right now that you're aware of?
Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, it was a little confusing. I'm just curious because there are 3 upland designations and one of them is forestry. And the survey that you created did not address whether that it talked about commercial and it talked about residential, but it doesn't talk about forestry. And forestry is one of the 3 upland designations. And are there residents who are, is forestry 1 designation being used as residential?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. It's difficult for us to say because there's no checks and balances in place for us to be informed as to where residential use may or may not be occurring. What this bylaw does permit is where there is residential use permitted, short-term rentals would be permitted as an accessory use to the residential use. So residential use has to be permitted and in place in order for the short-term rental use to be a permitted use.
Thank you. I'm just looking for something in my binder. So you're saying that they because the phrase that's in the bylaw, it talks about permitted in all designations, right? That's where you're landing it. So if there was an aquaculture 3 zone where people are actively fish farming, for example, and they're allowed to have a residence, would they then also be allowed to have a short-term rental?
Thank you through the chair. Only where residential use is permitted, so where an aquaculture use is in place, residential use is not permitted, so a short-term rental would not be permitted in an aquaculture zone.
I've got a comment while Director Haney's just checking out her notes there. One of the things I found interesting was that residents do, similar to Quadra, the rest of the Discovery Islands and Cortez Island, that residents do support short-term rentals in all zones. They want to see this as part of our economy. People are pro short-term rental. However, very similar to the surveys and results from Cortez and the primary residence requirement surveys that have been done, that this survey also points to that direction, that people want short-term rentals, but they want to make sure that happens on primary residence, that there's somebody there who's a local person who's either hosting it or it's their personal property, which is comforting for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Just to add to the forestry discussion, so forestry 1 does allow for residential use. So if there is a residential use currently in place on a forestry zoned parcel, with this amendment, a short-term rental would be permitted as an accessory use to that residential use. Where there's forestry lands that are not being used for residential use, a short-term rental would not be permitted at this time.
And just to follow up on that, so you're suggesting that if adding it to the uses permitted in all designations, this line, doesn't create a possible confusion for people who may have a land which is designated for something other than residential use? I think that's one of my main concerns.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So it's not saying in residential zoned properties. So that's the difference. So some amendments could actually say in residentially zoned, over residentially zoned parcels or over lands zoned R1 or R2 or something of that nature. This is saying where residential use is permitted. So residential use is permitted in most bylaws over commercial lands as well. So if there's an upland commercial zone where there's a residential use that's permitted and that residential use is in place, then a short-term rental would be permitted accessory to that residential use. So this is speaking to use, not specific zone types. So wherever residential use is permitted, which is what was shown through the survey results.
Okay, well, that's great. If that's the technical answer, then I'm comfortable with that. I do have I am interested in, and I'm curious if Mr. Leach maybe has a comment on that. Like, I'm curious about replacing the definition of resort with a definition for tourist accommodation, which doesn't include the current parameters of the definition of resort. Is it okay to ask to add the tourist accommodation and retain the private yacht club's definition in the?
Staff only give recommendations, and we have provided them to you. You make decisions and you vote on them. So
Okay.
we put our best foot forward and recommend that you support these. Beyond that, that is up to yourself and the other directors.
Great. Well, I do have a subsequent, Chair.
Yep. On receipt, anything further? Call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That's carried. Then a motion, Director Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that in bylaw 577, resort retain its current definition while further being amended to refer to the definition of tourist accommodation, and that the draft bylaw be returned to the Electoral Area Services Committee for consideration.
Any discussion on
Second.
that? Second by Director Manesh. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, carried. Thank you. Number 3. Electoral Area A, Menzies Bay Area, short-term rental amendments for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. And I'll just say that Area A is in favor of the staff recommendations here.
Then nothing to add. Nothing from staff then.
Sorry, is that a question?
Oh, it was a statement, I think.
It was
Yeah.
a statement, not a
Yeah.
question.
Thank you.
Okay. On receipt then. All those in favor? That's carried. And someone like to make a motion on number B.
I can move B. That the committee recommend that bylaw number 578, being Menzies Bay zoning bylaw 1996, amendment number 14, be forwarded to the board for first and second reading.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? It's carried, none opposed. And another one, Director Mooney, please.
I'll move that the committee recommend that the board authorize that the public hearing for bylaw number 578 be waived in accordance with section 464 of the Local Government Act.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. Okay, Campbell River Area Zoning Bylaw number 1404, Amendment May. For receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Staff can speak to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, the zoning amendment bylaw RZ 4D24 at 3809 Woodland Drive, as shown in the location map in the report, is to rezone the subject property from Country Residential 4 to Country Residential 2. It's a 2-hectare parcel, and the property has 2 existing homes, wells, and septic systems. The land use designation on the property is country residential, and adjacent to this parcel, there are existing CR4, CR3, and Rural 1 zoned parcels. The proposed CR2 zone allows for smaller lot sizes between 0.42 hectares and 2 hectares. The proposal is consistent with the official community plan of Area D and the land use designation with the CR2 zoning regulations in the zoning bylaw as well. Should the regional board approve the zoning bylaw amendment, it would allow the property owner to apply to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for a 2-lot subdivision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple questions about the application, and I'm curious how the larger lot, that as drawn on the attached report, fares when it comes to the required minimum lot frontage of 10% of the perimeter of the lot. Does it meet that requirement?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, it does meet the requirement for the 10% frontage, yes.
Okay, great, and thank you. And I noticed that the Island Health referral response referred to the subdivision standards, and I took a look at them, and they indicate for property serviced by individual wells, which is the case in this application, a minimum of 2.5 acres, minimum lot size if the native mineral soil is 36 inches deep. So I'm curious if there was a rationale for the application for rezoning and subdivision to create a 1 acre and a 4 acre lot when the smaller lot doesn't appear to meet Island Health's requirements.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. The approving authority for the subdivision of land in the SRD is the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and it would be at their discretion to approve or deny the subdivision application. We simply provide comments to MOTI on subdivision applications, but VHA does have its subdivision standards, and the applicant is aware of those standards and has applied for the lot sizes that they have, they have not applied for the lot sizes. They've simply applied for the rezoning of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? On receipt? All those in favor? That's unanimous and carried. A recommendation, please.
Move recommendation that as notice will be given in accordance with section 467 579-1 of the LGA. The committee recommend that bylaw number 579 be forwarded to the board for first, second, and third readings and final adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? And that's unanimous again. That's carried. Correspondence, Brewster Wind Project for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Dr. Mooney? John?
No, I'm fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I thought this was a very interesting and exciting piece of correspondence. BC doesn't need nuclear when we can choose wind generation. Magnitude's less toxic. So the letter asks for questions or feedback that we may have on the proposed project, including recommendations for additional stakeholders to notify or consult with. And based on my examination of the map and the proposed locations for the wind generator station's proximity to the Memakay and White Rivers, I have recommendations for two stakeholders that we would share with them. One stakeholder group, I believe, is cavers. I know that the White River area is well known for caves. The BC Speleological Federation and the Canadian Cave Conservancy would be important stakeholders to potentially notify. And I also know that the Memakay region has important fossil outcroppings, and perhaps recommending the British Columbia Paleontological Alliance and the Royal BC Museum Paleontology Department might be appropriate. I'm not sure if there's feedback on that or if we need a motion.
If it's direction, we'll need a motion. Was that you were hoping to give direction for us to do something?
Well, it's that the correspondence is asking the regional district to identify further stakeholders. And I believe that there may be further stakeholders that would like to be notified.
Okay, so we should probably have a motion then.
Okay.
All right then, anything further? Saying nothing on receipt, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Carried. Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I would move that Capstone Corporation be informed that based on their map, we recommend the BC Speleological Federation and the Canadian Cave Conservancy, as well as the British Columbia Paleontological Alliance and the Royal BC Museum Paleontology Department would be important stakeholders to connect with.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Vinesh seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed, Director Rice. That's carried. Okay, no new business, director's reports, addendums, a motion to move into closed. Dr.
Move
Mooney?
receipt of the report.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. And a motion.
I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public to consider matters deemed to fall within the parameters of subsections 91F, G, I, N, and O of the Community Charter.
Second.
Thank you, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, that's carried.